Hello, I would like to call the Instruction Committee meeting for the Frederick County School Board to order. I got mom brain here. The date is Monday, May 20th at 5:50 p.m. We have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion for approval of agenda?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. I've got brains too, but.
Any discussion?
I get it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. So we have new business, and I will now pass it over for Dr. Hummer to go forward with the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very, very much. It's great to see you all. Good evening. We have a series of items for you this evening, and all of these are actually, we're recommending to the full board for approval. So the first is mathematics textbook adoption. We also have the CTE textbook adoption, as well as the AP Environmental Science textbook adoption. We're not only going to review those books with you, but we're also going to be reviewing the process for how books get adopted, and we want to make sure that you all are fully informed on that. We also have a series of title grants, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we also have the approval of fees, which we will dive into here in a second as well. So as I mentioned, all of these we are recommending to the full board for approval. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Angelo and his team. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Hummer. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I will invite Dr. Crawford to come up and talk to you about the math textbook adoption recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Angelo, and good evening. The Math 612 community is requesting the purchase of 2 resources under the Math Resource Adoption, EDIA and Delta Math. And so the first product, EDIA, is a digital, personalized learning platform for all of our students. And this purchase is for over 7,400 students in grades 6 through 12. And so this would be their core resource. And these students would have a digital program that personalizes their learning from 6th grade through 12. And the tool can be used for classroom differentiated problem sets in math. It can be used at home all during the school year and during the summer. It can be used for formative assessment for teachers to know every day where kids are. The difference between this tool and a static tool is that it gives students feedback every step of the way through a problem rather than just at the end, oh, you're right or you're wrong. And so this is a digital computer adaptive tool for students. The other thing is that it tracks student progress all the way through the year. So I mentioned it can be used for formative assessment. So again, teams of teachers can meet and decide where to go next with students, not just 3 times a year or at the end of the year, but every single day. The other thing is that this supports our English language learners. It is in 117 languages, and the student controls what he or she needs in terms of that language. They can just toggle back and forth between Spanish and English, videos, problems, feedback, whiteboards, and all of that can be in any of 117 languages. And it accelerates growth with timely targeted interventions. How does it do that? Teachers can form intervention groups at the touch of a button by clicking on a student's data and right-clicking and saying assign to intervention group for whatever that skill is. And so those are quick, flexible groups that kids can go in and out of. So this tool is requested by the 612 math teachers for all students, 612, 7,400 plus of them.
May I just interject a very quick comment? Because this is a digital resource, we are not implying that a student walks into a classroom, gets plopped onto a laptop, and stays there the entire class period.
Exactly.
There's still teacher instruction. There's still teacher wandering around the room, checking on kids. They have opportunities to work outside of this textbook. There's still student-to-student collaboration. So this isn't just putting a kid on a device and letting him work. This is just simply the resource, much like a math book would be a resource. So I just want to be very clear about that.
Absolutely, Dr. Angelo. Thank you for saying that. This does not replace the teacher. The teacher still is instructing, and the kids have all of those learning experiences. It's just that this is basically a digital textbook in the sense that the problem sets can be differentiated. One student can have a slightly different set of problems than another based on where he or she is in the learning process. Or the teacher can decide everyone in the class is getting the same items because they want to give a quick check on that. that's up to the teacher. So it's a very versatile tool. The second resource, yes,
Can I ask a couple?
yes, absolutely.
How widespread is this program? A lot of,
It's used in Loudoun County in all the secondary schools. They did a similar adoption 3 years ago where they looked at MathSpace versus EDIA, which are the two products we looked at for this purchase. And each school could pick in Loudoun County, and all but 6, and they have many secondary schools, but all but 6 chose EDIA, and the others chose MathSpace. And so here our teachers chose EDIA over MathSpace.
do we have any documentation to show how it enhances students' learning?
There are 3 large-scale studies we looked at, and of course, it showed positive results. We also field tested it, and we looked at it last year, and then we looked at it this year for our high schools starting in December. Preliminary data from here, and again, SOL data is out, right now, but preliminary data from the high school does show growth where we started using it early in December at where we piloted it at one of our high schools. More growth than last year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Question.
So, yes.
I got one too, sorry. I actually got a couple of them.
Do you want me to go back to the EDIA slide?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, if you want, but yeah. So there's a couple things about this I'm really excited about. Where the parents can take that back and will the parents be able to help out their student with homework on this?
Yes. They can see everything. They can see how their students are doing. They can also watch the videos and the explanations, and yes.
Because I've had some parents say they don't learn math the way we used to learn math, so it's really hard for me to teach my student math. Or help them out with their homework. They're going across instead of up and down, and it's a little bit different, and it's harder for some of the parents. I know it's not our job to educate the parents, but I know that parents play a large part in that educational
Yes,
role for
they
the
do.
students. So with our ESL students, I'm glad that we have that flexibility, so that one of our students might be in here and he or she can speak English and read and write in English and stuff, but that parent might not be able to. So it does help with that parent being able to help out with homework. I would like to see how we are teaching math so that we can, show that to the parents out there so that they can help out, but that's for a different time. One of the things that did concern me that you did say, though, was if there's a student that's having a particular problem in one area, they'll change that question. So if we're grading students, supposed to be everybody the same, right? And they're competing for GPA, and one student's getting easier questions on there, how does that figure in?
That's a great question. So in formative assessment, where the students are working where they are in the learning progression of, say, a unit, the problems are differentiated so they get what they need, right? They might need to shore up some skills from the year before, or maybe they need an extension or so forth. But teachers can create summative assessments for the unit where all the kids are getting the same items, and they do that as well.
Okay.
They can also create common benchmarks for a school if schools are collecting data on a particular, in math, particular grade level or course. And so there's a lot of flexibility with all types of assessments, formative and summative, as well as this personalized learning path. Really
you.
good question.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So the second resource that teachers are asking for is to continue the use of Delta Math. They've been using Delta Math for 3 years. Delta Math is a fairly low-cost instructional tool used in the classroom, and it has videos and Google Classroom integration, and it's a product that has been used for 3 years. The data on usage is very, very high. Teachers really like this tool, and so they are asking to continue this as an instructional tool. It doesn't have the analytics and the formative assessment and the data tracking ability that EDIA has, but as a classroom tool, it has great resources. Parents love the videos, kids like the videos, that type of thing. But it's not as heavy duty of an instructional tool as EDIA is, and as able to cover the range of assessment that's needed. I mean, EDIA has tasks, rich tasks as well, not just multiple choice and that type of thing. Questions on that? And so I wanted to get to the process. I thought that
I
was.
do have one question, Madam Chair, if I may. So if we've used Delta Math for 3 years in FCPS, do we have to renew the lease on that? Is that what this is?
We bought Delta Math as part of a higher ed adoption. That means with calculus and statistics textbooks. And so we were able to get that license under that adoption. And so we want to extend that 612 for the next 3 years because they really liked it when we tried it out.
So this is only done in 3-year increments?
With digital tools, we can't purchase any more than that just because they change so rapidly. And we wouldn't want to be locked in for more than 3 years because something that, we would want to look at the data and make sure it's still working for our kids before, investing any more.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to my next point is one of the places that we've suffered for the last 3 years in SOLs is in math. And I understand that teachers are liking this and some parents are liking this, but is this the best tool to get us out of our SOL slump?
We believe that EDIA is, and that Delta Math will continue to support students in other ways in the classroom. And so they're kind of using those together in a complementary fashion.
Okay, I'm kind of curious to see what kind of data points we would get from Delta Math in congruence with EDIA, but if we're sliding downhill with Delta Math for the past 3 years, is that the issue?
Good question. We are looking at data. We look at multiple sources of data. And so we look at SOL data. We look at certainly formative data, which EDIA has incredible analytics that we've been looking at to identify where students need more and different instruction and learning experiences. And so we love that tool because we are asking for a tool that will help us know where our difficulties are so that we can do something different and fix those for kids.
Madam Chair, Mr. Atkins, if I may, I absolutely love that question. And the reason I love that question so much is because our number one focus is to make sure that our students are performing. That should be number one, no matter if it's based on a book or a resource or a teacher like we were talking about. But the other piece that we've been talking about over the course of the budget cycle is taking a look at the current resources that we're using. And these are conversations that I've had with Dr. Angelo and his team, where there are resources that we've been using for many years. And if there is not a direct link to students making progress with the resources that we have, and we see it across the board. We see it here in central office in regards to how we approve certain items here. And one of the things that we're also trying to do a better job of is working individually with our schools. And I was a teacher too, and I'm guilty as charged, where we see a product and we're like, I want to use this product, but is it really rendering positive results? And making sure that if it's not, that we are collaborating to make sure that we are finding those good results. So the question you asked is fantastic, because that is what we need to challenge ourselves to do, because if this is not rendering those positive results, and if this is part of the problem, we're not just going to continuously doing Groundhog Day. We have to ask ourselves, what is that best resource for our students so that we can start moving the needle for our kids?
Yeah.
And as Dr. Crawford mentioned, it's not just about this resource. It's a multitude of variables that we have to take into consideration. That's why we're looking at the assessments that we're using. We're looking at how we're using the data. Like, we can have the best tool in the world. Every school division could be using it. If we're not taking that data to drive the instruction to improve student performance, it's meaningless.
Right.
So there are a multitude of things that we're working on here. Professional development, how to use these tools. As Dr. Angelo mentioned, we don't want to just walk into classrooms and see kids sitting on these tools. We want this to be an extension of the instruction in that class so that we are moving the needle for our kids. So it is a challenge that Dr. Angelo and I have spoken many times, and we've spoken with the instructional department, is if we're not seeing a direct link, A, we need to make sure it's good for our kids, and B, we need to be better stewards of our dollar. So I love that question, and we need to do better with that. I agree.
So I'm assuming then we did look at other resources, to replace this, and how did that stack up compared to Delta Math?
So EDIA, we looked at EDIA with Math Space. We already owned Math Space in the previous textbook adoption. And with analysis from the committee, which, if I might go that way, where's the,
It's in the version that I have.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that this must be an old version that
Yeah,
we didn't get into.
that's fine.
I
We had a committee, and the process was that every single math teacher would try out EDIA and Math Space we already own to make sure that they were actually using it for a good amount of time, not just a week or 2 weeks, but for several months. And so our teachers have been using it since December at high school. And they compared those two, and they chose EDIA by and large. They really want a product that can do more than what we had in terms of what Dr. Hummer was talking about. In terms of Delta Math, they proposed Mathematic, Delta Math, and they compared those two. And every teacher could put up whatever they thought, and we had a committee go through and vet those. And of course, the vendors came out and did presentations and gave them logins and all of that. And we had 3 parents on the committee. We had teachers of students with disabilities, our English, our L teachers on the committee as well. But every teacher weighed in on this, not just a committee of teachers. We call that a committee, but it's really everyone. And so then it was open to public comment. We had 2 comments, and they were both positive. Delta Math, 90.2% of the teachers voted for it, and the usage is really high. Your question, though, remains, and it's excellent.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
If I could
Thank you.
just quickly provide clarification, the version that is posted includes the process. So the public version includes the process information that Dr. Crawford just shared verbally.
Understood. Thank you.
So you can look at that.
Thank you. So in terms of the ask, in terms of the budget, the budgeted amount for mathematics, 612, 7,400 students, is 916,000 plus. And that's for 7 years. And the reason it's 7 years is that's the lifetime of the SOL revision cycle at the state level. And so what I mean by that is we got new standards of learning in mathematics in August of '23. So in the 23-24 school year, we reviewed these products. And then in the 24-25 school year, we will implement these should they be purchased. Again, they're aligned to our new SOLs, our standards of learning in math. So that's kind of the process. We're not purchasing for the full amount of time because, again, with digital tools, we want to only commit for 3 years and then look at the data, just like you suggested, and say, yep, it's working for our kids, or no, this is not working, and of course, look closely at that. So here's the budget up here, and wondered if you had any further questions.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a quick question. I'm hoping that the analytics that we're using aren't just solely based on our SOL testing, but also based on the formative and summative analytics that come from all of the different secondary schools or wherever this is going to be used. Because obviously we don't want to just teach the test.
Very good point. And yes, this is, EDI is an incredible formative tool. Teachers can create tasks and questions in
Create
it. They're not
summatives,
just
yeah.
using, the canned ones. And they get immediate feedback, but more
Dr.
important,
Crawford, if you could speak into the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to look at me. That's all right. I'm not that pretty.
sorry. The kids get immediate feedback on every step of the way, and teachers get immediate feedback on how the kids are doing. But it's powered by AI, so it's limitless in the number of items, and teachers can write items based on kids' interests, whether it's basketball or whether it's cars or whatever. And so it's got a lot of potential for that customization. So yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
One question, Ms. Crawford.
Yes.
The budget, is that for the full 7 years? So that's just for
3
now?
years.
3 years. Wow.
Yes.
So we're coming in under.
For 3 years, but remember the budget's for 7 years.
Okay.
So we're slightly over, but
Good to go.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ms. Crawford.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. How are you guys doing? All right, so the two textbooks that we're going to talk about are for Dow J. Howard Center. So as you know, we are moving next year into our second year of criminal justice. So we did not have a textbook this year, so we worked with Deputy Thurgood, who's here tonight, and he did a lot of hard work to get the parent, student, community members involved to determine, and went through about 4 or 5 different textbooks. When looking, had a committee together, we would meet virtually and in person to talk just about, positives, negatives of each textbook. And so the textbook that we decided on was the one that you see in front of you, and I have a copy here as well if you would like to take a look through it. So this is going to be for students next year in our Criminal Justice 1 and then our Criminal Justice 2 program. So if you can go to the next one. So this kind of goes over, again, how the process is started is Deputy Thurgood took a look at some books that were out there in the community, the ones that were being used, and created a committee. So here are the textbooks. We had a total of 4 textbooks that we looked at. And again, it was just a discussion as far as the content of the textbooks and how it could relate best to our students in our criminal justice program. And then Deputy Thurgood came with his recommendation. We provided copies of the actual physical books at the school board office, at Dow J. Howard Center, made sure that it was up on our website. We did not receive any comments or feedback from the community members. So for that one, it's not in here, but in terms of CTE and textbook adoption, those funds come out of Perkins Plan. So for this one, if we do just like a classroom set of the actual textbook, it's about $3,000. And if we want to do an online, that costs an additional $2,000. So that is our first one in terms of CTE. Are there any questions on the criminal justice book?
Madam Chair. So with the 3,000 and 2,000, would that both come out of Perkins Plan funds?
Correct, yeah. Everything that we discuss in terms of, we'll talk about pharmacy technician next, comes out of Perkins.
I figured everything did, but I didn't know if being that it was an online resource, we'd take it from somewhere else.
Nope, all out of Perkins.
Good deal. Thank you.
Madam Chair, how long is the textbook expected to be used?
Usually, kind of as Dr. Crawford said, that, and especially with criminal justice and just with the nature of it, we look at our textbooks every year to ensure that they're still kind of filling our competencies. And we're always, luckily, textbook companies will provide us a lot of textbooks, a lot of times to review. So I'm sure with, under Deputy Thurgood's guidance and in the years as we continue to grow our program, we're going to ensure that we are using, what is the latest textbooks that we need to really make our program pretty stellar.
Well, would there be a benefit to the online versions for, say, updates and?
Yeah, and the online version has some activities that students can interact directly with. I will say what I've noticed a lot of times too, especially within CTE, is a lot of times students are kind of wanting those hard copy books. And they actually, instead of just being online all the time, they actually enjoy having a textbook right in front of them.
Okay.
I was like, I'm using this, it wasn't working. All right, our next one is our pharmacy technician book. So we've had our pharmacy technician program since 2017. This year, it was moved over to Dow J. Howard. And so what we found is we had a new program director that was really focused this year on getting students to pass that national exam at the end of the year. We had 6 students this year, and we had a 100% pass rate. So that's incredible. The national average is around 70%. And so when we were reviewing books, we ensured that we looked at a whole kind of slew of, can you go down, Dr. Angelo, just one, sorry? So we looked at 3 different books. We work closely with Shenandoah University and their School of Pharmacy because they are very involved in our pharmacy program. They're on our Health and Medical Science Advisory Board. So it was kind of the same thing where we sit down and we actually look at all of the different textbooks and determine what's going to help our students, honestly, at the end of the day, pass that exam. That's our goal with our pharmacy technician program. And we found that Mosby's had the best opportunity to help students be prepared for that exam because it is a very challenging exam. And we did the same thing as we did with criminal justice, is we had hard copies here if you'd like to take a look. We've had them at the school board office for the past month. We've also had them at Dow J. Howard for the past month. And then for that one, it would be similar in a sense of it would come out of Perkins. And so the money for that one, if we're talking just about a classroom set, which is a classroom for pharmacy tech is around 10 students, is about $1,000. And then we'd also purchase workbooks, which usually are about like $50 each for students to work directly out of. And a lot of that has to do with like the practice tests, like physically writing what a prescription would look like on a label, things like that. Questions?
I may be old-fashioned, but I notice a contrast between the program that you're presenting with tangible books and the mathematics program, which is computerization. Like you had stated, it's more of a tangible aspect of learning, and it seems to me that a student can be guided better with a book and participation with the teacher. And I have this from personal experience with my son. I have to get on him with the computer, and he has to try to explain to me that I have to try to catch up, whereas if I had a book, I could more or less read exactly what I need to help him with. I just feel a little hesitant with all the technology and the advancements that you presented. I feel more at home with the textbooks, and the cost factor seems to be a big difference also.
Well, and I think too, I think the wonderful thing about where we are with technology is that teachers have so many resources. So teachers still use textbooks, they use workbooks, they use projects. And so I don't think it's not an all or nothing. We're very fortunate is that we just are able to provide resources that really differentiate, I feel, between the different students and how they work. Because we do have it in our pharmacy tech, we do have a good portion of the online aspect, because if they're sitting in front of a cash register, and having to input what the actual prescription is, and then we have the also actual handling money, because we found that a lot of students, when we put them out in the pharmacies, didn't handle money, and we didn't really do a proper job of teaching them how you count out money and handle money. So I think it's just a matter of finding that good balance between tech, books, whatever you can use in your little magical bag of tricks. Good.
All right, Ms. Levine will come up and talk about the science textbook adoption.
So we are proposing the AP Environmental Science textbook for adoption. AP Environmental Science is a course that is available to our 11th and 12th graders who are enrolled at our high schools. And the particular resource that they're recommending is Environmental Science for the AP course. And one of the things that the teachers noted who served on our textbook committee that set this particular resource apart was how it was structured. So this particular resource is structured around the 4 big ideas, which is how College Board sets up the AP course. It's what teachers are given as their framework for the course. And this particular resource is not only structured around those 4 big ideas, but it's also aligned with our science and engineering practices, which are the science practices that are interwoven across all of our science courses in the state of Virginia. This particular text also offers a digital companion resource that gives the students an opportunity to truly practice to prepare for the AP exam. And this particular one of the things that they noted that also set this particular resource apart from the other books that we reviewed was that what they have found students struggle with on their assessment, so their AP exam, is the mathematics and application to environmental science. This particular textbook offers tasks called Do the Math that are embedded within the textbook and in the digital resources that allows the students to practice the application of math that is required to be able to do the data analysis for environmental science. So this was one of the things that they noted that none of the other resources we reviewed offered. So the process we went through is very similar to the process that both math and CTE went through. We established our committee, and we had a teacher from the teacher that teaches the course at each of the 3 high schools who served on that committee. They selected 3 textbooks to review, and then through that process, they made their recommendation individually, and then we came back together, and their recommendation was across the board this particular textbook. And then we also made it available for public comment. We did not have any community members who commented on the textbook. It was available at each of the high schools as well as at the school board office, and then it was also available on the FCPS website. And our budgeted amount was $45,675, and to purchase digital access for all of our students and hard copies of the textbook for all of our students would bring us in slightly under budget at $44,578.38. We did visit the idea of having a class set of the textbook and digital access for home use. I personally spoke to some of the students, and they said that it's really important for them in their AP classes to have a hard copy of the textbook at home. And we are able to do that with the funds that we had budgeted. Are there questions?
Just a comment. To that point, I think it is very important to have those hard copies available for the students to take home. Also for parents, to actually crack in and help them out with their homework. Sometimes we do need a refresher as well. But it's good to hear that you guys came in under budget and that you're working with Shenandoah as far as like what they need to get into college and what the college is expecting. So kudos to you and the committee for that. I really appreciate your forethought and getting that done. So thank you.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, just really quick, did you all want to approve the books first before we go into grants? You want to approve everything at the end to go to the full board? It's totally up to you. I just want to throw that out there. Up to you all.
I think we could do it all at the end if that's okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will invite Monica up to the microphone, and if you don't mind just pulling that microphone down so it's pointing at you and not so much the ceiling. Thank you.
Welcome. Good evening, Dr. Hummer, members of the board. We are going to transition to grants. I will be presenting Title I, II, and IV, and then my colleague Emily Headley will be presenting Title III. So we will go a little bit out of order in terms of the grants themselves, and that's just because of who manages them. So I will start with Title I. So the purpose of Title I is to provide financial assistance to Frederick County schools as well as all Virginia districts to meet the needs of low-income families, to ensure that children meet the academic standards. And we have been told to plan for level funding. So the amount that we received last year was $2,042,433. So the grant has been written for that level funding. And then we usually receive our final allocation sometime in September, in which the grant has to be amended when we receive that. We do not know that final number until they give it to us, so it could be a little more, it could be a little less. So the plan that has been presented to you is for level funding from the previous year.
Can you
So-
clarify if that's state or federal funds?
These are all federal funds.
Federal funds.
Yes. But it's federal, but the money is given to the state and the state tells us. So it kind of trickles down. Yeah. So these are the schools that will be receiving Title I services next year. Any school that is above 40% free and reduced lunch receives Title I funding. We have an addition this year in Greenwood Mill Elementary, and as you will notice, Gainsborough Elementary is actually below the 40% threshold. We have completed a waiver for them to continue to receive Title I services, and the reason that we will continue to provide services to them is because of that waiver. And as you can see, Greenwood Mill has actually gone above Gainsborough. So when we provide services or we allocate funds to these schools, they do have to go in ranking order. So Evendale receives the most service all the way down to Gainsborough, who receives the least amount of service.
Madam Chair, if I may just provide additional information there. We are funded based on the number of students, not the number of schools. So if it doesn't, I'm going to say it doesn't matter how many schools we have identified as Title I, other than the more schools that become identified Title I, it likely means additional funding simply because that means more students are receiving free and reduced.
So as I said, we're planning for level funding. Last year, we did not have this many schools, so we're actually having to spread our amount thinner this year because we have more schools that qualify. So we won't know. We are not applying for the funds. The funds are already granted to us. We just have to have an approved allocation in order for the funds to be dispersed, if that makes sense. Currently, all our Title I schools run a school-wide program. So what that means is that our students that qualify for free and reduced lunch, it is not just those students who receive these services. We provide services to all students within that Title I school. Our objectives are specific to academic as well as well-being focused. So improve literacy, improve numeracy, parent-family engagement is a huge part of Title I services. So you'll probably see Title I events and things like that being shared out. That is a requirement within the grant that our schools participate in family engagement activities. We do have a survey that goes out to survey the parents to ensure their engagement and how they're feeling about those events. And then the classroom and community relationships is that social emotional well-being layer.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
forgive my ignorance, but who determined that the Title I grant was going to be level funding?
So I go to a conference yearly, and they tell us at that point how to write the grant. And within that conference, they told me to plan for level funding.
Even though we have more schools?
Yes.
And who's they?
So for Title I, it's Tiffany Frierson, who is our Title I coordinator for the state.
Okay, so the state basically determined.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tiffany Frierson?
Yes. You can go to the next slide. All right, so this is our budget. As you'll see, the majority of our funding is going to go towards salary and benefits, which includes Title I math specialists, Title I reading specialists, as well as a Title I instructional assistant. Depending on what that final allocation is will depend on what the school allocation is. Historically, for the last few years, due to additional funding, we have been able to give funding to the individual schools. As of right now, we are going to wait until we receive our final allocation to determine if we can do that, because we do want to ensure that our salaries are taken care of. As you can imagine, with which it's been wonderful that we are receiving an increase in pay. However, that does impact the amount that we can then send directly to the schools. We may have to reallocate some funds to go in our salaries. We do have a homeless set aside that is also a requirement of the grant. We have a homeless and foster care liaison for Frederick County, so that $9,698 will go to the backpack program for our homeless students and services over the summer. And then our parent-family engagement set aside, we are required to set aside 1%. What you'll see there, it's a little bit larger because 1% for parent-family engagement doesn't go very far when you're talking 10 schools. But again, if we need to put some additional funds in that salary line, that may be adjusted in the future as well. Any questions about the budget? I will move on to Title II, so if you want to hold there for just a second, any questions about Title I overall? Awesome. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one question, just so I can wrap my head around it. You said for those set-asides, I believe, that some of the money might get allocated to some of the schools. Is that, to Mr. Bell's point, is that schools that were not on that list, or they have to be on that list?
They have to be on the list, correct. Yeah. And it really does come back to, because even for the school allocation, we take salaries and benefits off of the top no matter what. So just planning for the future, we want to make sure that we have enough funds within our salary line to ensure that our staff is covered over the summer months and things like that. Because we're applying for the grant now, we don't receive final allocations until September, so we have to make sure that we're aligning and we're in alignment with finance as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll move on to Title II. So really the purpose of Title II is how to support our instructional staff and our administrative staff to then support students. It always comes back to the student, but it really is about the professional learning side to ensure that we have the most high-quality staff in front of our students. So the majority of the funding within Title II does go to professional learning funds. Again, we are planning for level funding, so this is based off of last year's allocation. So Title II Part A is $379,462.32. We do, for the last 3 years, we have transferred Title IV funds, the last 2 years, and if this continues, we'll transfer Title IV funds into Title II. The reason for that is that Title IV was primarily being used for professional learning purposes anyway, so it just made sense to create one application, transfer the Title IV funds in, and then put all of our professional learning efforts together rather than having two separate grants for essentially the same thing. So the total for that is $517,635.32. Title II does serve all schools and grade levels, but I will say that's really indirectly because the funds are going towards professional learning efforts for the staff, not necessarily directly for materials and things like that for students.
Madam Chair, is this a Tiffany thing too?
No. This is Anthony Tyler.
So I'm curious, how did they come to their conclusion that we needed just level funding?
So from my understanding, the federal government gives the allocation, and then once the state receives the allocation, the state then determines what the funding is for each school division.
And they don't share what the criteria is or how they come about their decision?
I'm sure that it is somewhere, but I have not looked into it, but I would be happy to do that for you.
Well, I can too. Thank you.
Okay,
I
you're
appreciate it.
I'm actually curious as well because I anticipate that we may not receive the same funding due to just some things that have come out recently from the federal government. The most recent release from the White House has been interesting to read regarding federal funding as well. So I anticipate they're going needs-based. So I'm not sure what our funding will look like next.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a project we can share.
Yes. All right. Okay, so Similar, as I shared, the focus really is, it comes back to the student, and we want to ensure that we're measuring impact of the professional learning efforts and how then that impacts the student. We do have 2 private schools that participate in Title II. It is a requirement of the grant that we send any private schools, surrounding private schools, if they want to participate. They have to complete a needs assessment. They have to have a meeting with me. They have to have a plan. The 2 schools that are participating are Mountain View Christian Academy and Timber Ridge. They use the majority of their funds for professional learning, and Timber Ridge has used it historically for the same thing for multiple years, which is for a crisis intervention training for 1 teacher. And this is our budget for Title II. The personnel and benefits is specific for substitutes and stipends. That isn't necessarily for a salary. That's if we have staff that need to participate in a training and require a substitute to attend that training, as well as stipends if we need to bring teachers in over the summer or after school, things like that. We do allow stipends for that. And then you can see there the list of things that we support through Title II. The biggest thing we're proud of all of them, but we're especially proud of our tuition reimbursement program. We support a lot of teachers through that. We also support our provisionally licensed teachers. We right now are providing 100% to our provisionally licensed teachers to ensure that they get their licensure, which is awesome. It's a huge recruiting effort. You can see the private schools set aside there, and I do need to make a correction to that. That set aside is actually $9,727.98. And if you want to know who's getting what, I can tell you that as well. Mountain View is $7,605.51 of that, and Timber Ridge is $2,122.47 of that, and that is based on total student population is how those figures, and the grant actually figures that. I just put in the number of students that attend the school, and then it spits out a number for me, so.
So would the total allocation, then that changes?
It doesn't, because it's actually included within the professional learning. So where it says set asides included in totals above, that additional funding is within the professional learning column. So that $486,821.90, whatever the difference is between the 2 numbers that I gave you, part of that is within private schools.
Roger that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's all for Title II and IV questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Headley will address Title III.
Thank you so much for your time today. Now, the purpose of Title III is to support English language acquisition here in the district. And we do that several different ways. We work with our multilingual students primarily to get them college and career ready. And we're trying to boost on-time graduation and to support our teachers so that they are creating language-rich classrooms. Now, if you go to the next slide. Now, our Title III allocation is pre-populated into the application, and it's the same number as last year. We're learning, aren't we? So then they usually adjust in the middle of the summer. We get a new number based on immigrant youth. Immigrant youth funds are students who were not born in the United States and have been here 3 years or less. So last year we had an initial allocation and then we received more funds. I don't know if we will receive more funds this year. Based on our numbers, we have grown, as you might expect. We use title funds to support all schools, all grade levels, kindergarten up through 12th grade.
Madam Chair. Name?
Oh, Emily Headley?
Thank you. That's your name? No, that's.
Yes, that's
Oh, no,
me.
the name of the
Oh,
person.
the person.
Yeah.
Well, Louise Sutton is in charge of Title III.
Who?
Louise Sutton.
Thank you.
So those are our numbers from last year, and we're going to maintain those numbers in our application this year. But if you'd like to move to the next slide. We measure our success with Title III based on basically two criteria. The first one is on English language growth. Our multilingual students take an extra test every year. It's called the WIDA Access Test. They take it in February. And the state of Virginia measures how much they're growing. They track each child and how much they grow every year, and we're supposed to meet certain growth bands. This year, the goal in the application is that 56% of the children will make that growth. The last year that we have data for, we were at 48%, so we have some growth to do. We also look at how many of our language learners are passing their SOL tests, and we have the goal that 45% of them will pass their reading test and 55% will show proficiency in math. We will use Title III funds to support that growth.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Why so low of an expectation?
Currently, if the last data that I have, the students were performing at about 33%. It's from 2 years ago. And so we asked for some guidance from the state of Virginia, and they said, aim high, aim 45.
Yeah.
So that's where that is right now. I'm new in the position, sort of learning how our schools work, and I'm hoping that it is higher for sure.
Yeah, me too.
That's an excellent question.
I would agree. Of course, we want 100%, but I think we want to make sure that we have realistic and attainable goals and continue to move forward towards 100%. So would absolutely love to see that number higher, but
Yeah.
I think we need to stay focused on moving in
I'm
a
looking
positive
at
direction.
The last, for 22-23, it was 32% of reading and 34% of our language learners passed in math. So we don't have the comparative data this year yet, but we will see, and we have to ask some serious questions. When it comes to the breakdown of our funding on the next slide, we have rearranged some things. If you look, we're requesting, or we're using a lot more funds for personnel to develop curriculum. At present, we don't have a unified curriculum for a newcomer that comes into our country, and so the teachers can't share resources in that same way. So we're going to work together. We've got a committee that starts next week, really looking at what we're doing with kids so we can accelerate. So the personnel services involves a lot of curriculum development and then also a family liaison that is situated at James Wood Middle, but she also supports any of our district-wide agenda to help make families feel like they can come and ask questions about their students' progress, and that teachers feel like they can reach out to families. So that's our personnel, and the benefits is related to that as well. Purchased and contracted services involves two primary things. The first thing is a database called Elevation that keeps track of our students for us and their language growth over time. And then it also has a professional development piece that involves videos and lesson plans and modules that any teacher, whether you're a science teacher or a reading teacher, you can watch to see how you might work with language learners. So Elevation will help us meet that third goal of boosting professional development across the county when it comes to working with multilingual learners. Contracted services also involves conferences for our teachers. Internal services, that budget line relates to some costs for busing for different activities. For example, we took students to Laurel Ridge Community College to look at their career programs and their college programs. Other charges encapsulates teachers going to conferences and their hotels and things like that. It's actually rather small when you think about it, but we need to build some professional learning for our teachers. And then the last element, materials and supplies, is actually a big difference from what we've done in years past. The district has primarily relied on a program called Imagine Learning. We provided it for all elementary and middle school language learners. And it's expensive, it's online, and we've had some good results, but when we look at the performance of our students, only 44% of our secondary students are meeting their goals as opposed to 52% of our elementary, because the secondary were getting nothing. And so we looked at some different products, and one of them that was available was Rosetta Stone has a product for schools, and it comes with a scope and sequence and materials and research-based language things. So I purchased a demo. Our teachers tried it this spring, and we have some good results. So we are switching some of our programs. We're still going to provide Imagine Learning for some targeted kids that need that intervention, but we're going to try Rosetta as well and track our data and see where we go. Any questions at all? All right, thank you so much.
Madam Chair, if I may just say something, and it's somewhat in relation to Mr. Atkins, your comment or question earlier. Ms. Headley is our very first ever EL supervisor whose role it is to be the EL supervisor. We've never had a dedicated EL supervisor before. The other folks that we've had that have been working in that role were never trained EL teachers. They were trained at something else. That was their primary role, and they took on EL supervision as a secondary thing. So we are, first of all, super pleased with Ms. Headley and the headway she's made. She understands what the students need. She understands what the teachers need. She has wonderful relationships with the students. The fact that we've never had a curriculum for our EL staff, and she's bringing that in, like, these are huge things that are going to make a significant difference. I think we all look at that data and look at those target numbers and say, I mean, it's embarrassing to present it, honestly. But I'm very, very pleased with Ms. Headley and having that position. And I would just say kudos to Dr. Hummer for making that happen for us by rearranging other positions. But this is a desperate need that we've had, and I am 100% confident that we will move forward under her leadership.
Thank you, Ms. Headley.
Awesome.
Okay, the final item I will take primarily. I think Ms. Camry has one teeny tiny little part of this, but this is primarily me. And so under your policy 729, we are able to charge fees, and we do charge fees for certain experiences that students have at all three of our levels. And so we work through this every year. We get feedback from teachers and from principals, and we sometimes are asked to adjust fees and decline that because they've been adjusted recently, or we need to have it quantified as to why those fees are going up. So there are very few increases. I'm going to attempt to click on the links and pull these up, and we'll see how this goes. Deal. Okay, so we'll start at the elementary level. There are very few fees at the elementary level, and there are no increases for this year.
Can you make it bigger?
I can try to, but the last time I did that, it shrunk it all the way down, so I'll do my best.
If not, no worries.
I don't think
have
I
it in my
can.
computer.
Yeah,
but
so the bar, the left, so next to the paintbrush, over to the left. There you go. One more. There you go. So just make that like 125, 150. There you go. Is that better, Mr. Bell?
Mold. Yeah, I see it.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Okay, so there are no increases in student fees at the elementary level, and you can see that these are for things like homework folder replacement costs. So they get the first one for free, and then if they need a replacement. Some of our schools don't even charge this. Honestly, they just give the kid what they need. The recorder, which is the musical instrument that I have no doubt every elementary parent loves, and that is, once they purchase that, that is theirs to keep. My hunch is that the mute is probably the more popular option there, but we do charge for the recorder. And then some of our schools charge for choral apparel so that they have somewhat uniform look. And then the tuition and fees, which Ms. Camry can speak to if you have any questions about that. Any questions about any of the elementary fees?
Dr. Angelo, if you don't mind, and Madam Chair, I apologize. I know you're probably going to get to this, but it's probably pertinent to mention it now that for students in need, we do pay for these costs. So if there's a student or a family that can't afford these items, we front that cost for them.
That's
Just want to make
correct.
sure we
And-
mention
And
that.
that is on the list of fees. That's a disclaimer at the
Want to
bottom.
mention that.
And that goes into our debt service fund, I believe. Is that where that goes?
To pay for the fees that the kids can't pay for?
Right.
We absorb that in the budget.
Okay.
So we really don't have a separate line for it, we just pay it.
Okay. I can't imagine it'd be that much.
No, and often schools just pay that individually. And I do want to clarify that when we say any student that has a need and can't afford it, we don't ask for verification. We don't say, well, you're not free and reduced, none of that. If a family or a student says, I can't afford to pay this fee and I want to participate in this thing, we take care of it. We don't ask questions. So for the middle school, and I apologize because this doesn't have the red line on it, so I can't honestly remember where the changes were, but there weren't very many changes on the middle school fees at all. And I do know that there were a couple of fees that were requested to be increased that we did not increase because, again, if we can't quantify.
Is there any way, before we vote on this, I would like to see the
To see
changes,
the
that way we
changes.
know what we're voting
I'll-
on.
I will.
I'm sure it's good, but I would hate to vote on something that I don't know the number for.
Understood. I will have that information available for you tomorrow
I
night.
think they were, when we discussed earlier, there was the FBLA membership dues because they had to participate in something further.
Yeah, so FBLA membership dues are set by the FBLA, not by us, and that's an
Okay.
optional after-school
It might have been Family and
experience.
Consumer Sciences, I remember from our conversation.
Do you
but it
remember,
was-
Allison? Yeah, I don't think we did at the middle school level. I will definitely have that information for you. I apologize. Okay, and then a couple of increases at the high school level. Metal fabrication is up to $30. Metal fabrication hasn't been increased in, I can't even remember when the last time it was, and the cost of the material has risen so significantly that they requested an increase for that, and that was definitely justified based on, because the students create things in their projects and they take them with them, so we can't reuse the metal. The metal is gone.
Do we source that metal locally? Like, I know, like Winchester Metals, for instance.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I would just think about shipping, It's not like you can just grab it off Amazon.
Right, and I'm not sure that there's one specific source probably that they use. They probably use wherever they can get it the least expensive. Art 3 is going from 25 to 30. Again, these are fees that haven't been raised in a long time. And again, this isn't about we just want to get more money from our kids. This is about the supplies, as is the case with everything. Things have increased in cost, and so they just can't absorb it anymore. So they're asking for an increase there.
Madam Chair, before you scroll too far down, if I may,
Sure.
I have a question. We recently attended Sharondo's band night and discovered that it's far more than $30 for a fee to be in the marching band. And I'm just curious why the additional fees that they charge for marching band members aren't included in this.
I'd have to ask that question and find out what those fees are going toward. This is information that
Uniforms,
we
trips, things like that.
So trips, they would have to pay for or fundraise. I mean, that's with everybody.
Of course.
I'd have to just. Yeah, we do pay for them. We supply for
Madam
the
Chair,
uniforms.
if I may, I would probably go on a limb and say that was probably booster fees. I know there are separate fees that sometimes that they charge for separate items. So that's why it's not on this list here, but we can look into that. I only know for a fact when we were working through the James Wood situation that there was fees that they were charging as well, and we looked at the other schools.
Right, they are booster fees. but
Okay, so that's separate than this.
I understand, but if a parent looks at this, and I mean, I'm not saying me, but if a parent looks at this and they see, oh, $30, sure, let's have my child in band. Well, the impetus is that they're going to want to join marching band and do all of these other things. I think that there should be a place for them to include these booster fees so that parents can see the upfront cost before they get their child all excited about playing an instrument, because you also have instrument rental as well, and you have the booster fees as well, and it can cost several $100s for a parent to provide this opportunity for their kid, and it can be extremely difficult to tell your kid, I'm sorry, we can't afford to do this.
So there might need to be two different things, because these are fees that you all approve because they are us charging the fee.
No, I understand that.
The booster fee could be listed somewhere without it being on the approval list, because
Yeah, if it's on the website
'Cause we don't-
somewhere, on
we
the
don't
Frederick
set
County
it.
Public Schools website somewhere, more clear than, because the boosters have their own websites. And if you aren't a part of the marching band, you're not going to have access until you go to the meeting and find out it's going to cost you $140 for your kid to be in the band,
we can,
on
we
top
can
of
definitely-
renting the instrument.
We can take a look at that and see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To Mr. Bell's point, is there any way before tomorrow's meeting, I know it's tomorrow, but we could just add that in there, maybe a slide for that? That way parents, to your point, can see that, because it does stack up, when the cost of groceries is rising every day. People in households do make cuts, so being transparent with that and being upfront with them. And I know different boosters will probably charge different, I'm guessing. Is that the
I would
case?
imagine so, yes.
I would think so, based upon how much they fundraise.
Exactly.
And we might not have the exact number, but a ballpark at least. That way they could see that. I know it's also not something that we as a school board is charging, so this would only pertain to what we're looking at. The band would be, and the boosters would be something different. But to your point, I think that this is something that we could get done pretty easily.
I don't know if I can't, I don't want to promise that I can get that by
Okay.
tomorrow evening, but we'll do our best to do that.
And Madam Chair, if I may, so to that point, Mr. Atkins, I think there's probably going to be a list of different activities that our students engage in that are going to be beyond these dollars, right? So for example, I know it's not on here, but just to provide example, if I want my child to play football and there is an athletic fee to play football, there's probably additional things that you're going to want to buy. You're going to want to buy cleats, you're going to want to buy armbands and gloves and all those things that are additional that might be required to play at your best capability. I say all that to say, if we want to put together a list of what potentially you might have to buy for these activities, we can absolutely do that and put all that together. This is just the fee to actually participate in the band. But also, one of the things that we've been talking about as well, and Dr. Angelo kind of mentioned that with the elementary, is I think we're due for reviewing these fees ultimately altogether. Now, one of the other aspects with that is there might be some additional costs that we're going to have to accrue in our own budget. So I don't want to make any too hasty decisions, because if we say, all right, we're going to cut this budget, this one and that one, I want to make sure that we're full disclosure on that. But anyways, with each of these activities, we're more than happy to put those together. But keep in mind, it's not contingent on approving that $30, because there's additional fees that we can show in regards to that. Now, the other piece too, because again, this was all the work that we did with our boosters. One booster might go to a specific field trip where another won't. So they might raise money for that field trip where another won't do that. So again, it's contingent on that school and that community. However, to Mr. Bell's point and to your point, I think we need to work with our schools to make sure we're communicating with with our families of, yes, it's $30, but there might be some additional things that you're going to have to accrue, and we're going to have to figure out how to pay for these items for our kids.
And I think also how to visualize it for the families that are out there, because you see what the fees are and you think, oh, $30.
And it's more than that.
Yeah, but I should have prefaced by saying that, yes, this is booster, it's not our purview, but it's something I think should be included for parents to see
Correct.
that there's additional funding that, or additional funds that'll have to be paid in order to participate, whether it's football, band, whatever sport. Like with my son running, we have to pay probably twice a year, $170 for new cleats because he wears them out, or for running shoes. So, I mean, we're spending, quite a bit of money on shoes, which aren't a necessity, but kind of is.
And, to your point, I think, people getting different cleats, or cleats, we're just going to use that as an example since we brought up running and football. I know costs went up, but I mean, I had $30 cleats when other kids had $100 cleats, and it just, where we lived and what we could afford at the time. But not everybody needs those armbands. Not everybody needs the big gloves or anything like that. So I don't think that would be something that we would include. I think, the basic fees like what we have here, and then a projected fee for what the boosters would charge, just a range. That way, because they do work closely with the schools. And yeah, if you do want to participate, you are going to incur those fees. So I think that part would be justified by putting it on here with maybe an asterisk or something beside it saying this is not something that the school charges. This is something that if you want to participate, you're going to look at. I wouldn't want to go ahead and include everything for football, baseball, because different bats cost, different amounts of money, different gloves, whatever. Some kids wear eye black underneath their eyes, some don't. So yeah, I wouldn't get into the weeds on it, just kind of a projection what the boosters would charge. And then I don't know if besides the booster stuff, as far as how could we take this to the full board with the understanding that there will be the redlined items on here tomorrow, at least?
If I may, so the red line items we will get to you, because that again is your purview to approve. I think all we're trying to say is that we agree with what both of you are saying in regards to putting that list together, but it's not part of any approval.
Understood.
Right, and I also would make a strong recommendation, once we start putting booster items on here, I think it's gonna blur lines and it's gonna cause for major confusion. So if we can put together what each school potentially, because again, it's going to change every year as well, because the boosters provide alternate and additional opportunities. I don't want to, pigeonhole us into what those booster costs might be, but also to communicate that. And I totally agree with that, and we need to communicate with our families. But I think that's what I'm trying to say is we're talking about two different things.
Agreed.
Yeah. So to have this up by tomorrow is not, I don't think that's necessary, but getting it out there to our families so they can all see that, absolutely.
I'm talking about just the redlined items.
Oh, yeah, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
That's
I'm talking about the booster. I apologize. Yes.
Just to
you will
bring it
see-
to the full board, if we as a board, as a committee, approve it to go to the full board, I'd like to see those numbers so that we actually have what we're voting on in front of us.
Yes,
That's it.
absolutely. Sorry, Mr. Atkins, I misunderstood. Absolutely.
That won't be a problem at all.
Easy enough.
Just a different version. Yes.
Board member questions or comments?
Okay. Do you want to speak to the tuition at all?
So the tuition,
Kinda got to.
I thought I was going to sneak out of here and not say anything. So the tuition is based on what our operating fund is, less any capital, and that's driven by state law. So what you see here, the tuitions across the board is the same for all levels, except for our employees. And Mr. Atkins, Jim, as White probably remember last year, we put into effect for our employees who have not been here at least 3 consecutive years to pay $1,500 to send their kids here. Once they've completed 3 consecutive years, then it's free for them. But the other two, I can give you this. if you want to know this, how many people we do have taking advantage of that, if you would like that
That's where I was
information.
going next.
Well, Mr. Atkins, I got you on that one, huh? So what we have, basically, we don't have any students in here paying out-of-state tuition. We have 0. We have 1 student who's paying in-state tuition. We have 15 employees who are paying $1,500 for their child to come, and then we have 55 employees who are not paying anything, so they've been here over 3 consecutive years.
Great.
And with that, I'll pause if there's any other questions.
I'm still glad that we did that as a recruitment tool, that way we can help alleviate that for our tenured teachers and keep them retained here in the county. So thank you for that.
Sure. I'll just go on to the Dow J fees. That's the last one. There are no additional fees at NREP. I'm sorry, there are no increases in fees at NREP, I should say. So auto body, again, one that has not been increased in a very long time, is going up from 40 to 60. I say a very long time. I mean, we could research it. I don't remember ever increasing auto body fees. I will say with regard to that, and that's just cost of materials and supplies that have increased. In addition to that, and I just want to give a shout out to the generosity of our community, our auto body and auto tech teachers do receive donations from various shops in the community whenever that's available. So we appreciate that. And we use them. Farm Tech is not a change in fee. It's just a move because Farm Tech is no longer taught at the high schools, at the base schools. It's now taught at Dow J. And so it's the same fee, just moved over to the Dow J schedule. Skills USA fees have gone up to $15. Again, that's an optional thing. Kids don't have to participate in that. Although they do, and they're very successful at it, I might add. And that's it for Dow J.
Could you scroll up just a little bit?
Sure.
So with the Dow J fees, I'm not seeing anything for the culinary arts. Are we expecting any fees for culinary arts?
Yeah,
I
if
put you on the
you don't
spot.
mind approaching the podium. Like, we are paying the tuition for the students.
We're paying 100% of the culinary arts fees, and I'm sure Dr. Angelo would echo this, and I heard Dr. Hummer provide this sentiment earlier. I mean, my desire would be that there are no fees, quite frankly. I mean, and for what it's worth, this doesn't really even come close to covering. It is very, very expensive. I think our credential, or our state testing fee is close to, 10,000 just for Dow J. Howard. So like we're supplementing.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even come close. So, yeah. And that's why I say, the desire to remove the fees completely, it's really a drop in the bucket for us. So.
Yeah, and that's why I was wanting to ask, because I know that, being that's our newest program going on, if students are interested in going, if there was any kind of associated fees with that, wanted to let them know up front, but it's good to hear that we're taking care of that
There will never
completely.
be a fee at Dow J. Howard that a student can't afford and not participate. That won't happen.
I like to hear that.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So that is everything we have. And we do have a couple of action items that we're requesting that you move forward to the full board. They are actually all of them, all of the textbook adoptions, the title grant, and the student fees. Understood that the student fees will come with the red line tomorrow.
Understood. All right, ready? All right, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to send to the full board the approval of the mathematics textbook adoption.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second on the mathematics textbook adoption recommended to the full board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the CTE textbook for adoption and move it to the full board for
Mr.
approval.
Atkins?
Yeah, Mr. Atkins, just want to make a clarifying point. We have two CTE textbooks, so we should do the criminal justice and then the pharmaceuticals, please. We can spread.
Do we need to,
split those out,
do we need to
please.
separate the mathematics then?
I think
Well,
it's there are two
So we need to
products.
do the two for the mathematics as well.
Okay. All right.
Should we? I'm looking at Dr. Angelo.
Let me,
The Delta product is more of a supplemental resource. The primary product is the EDIA.
So the board only has to
the-
approve the one?
The one, but with regard to CTE, those are two totally different textbook
Okay,
adoptions,
so
so I
just
would
CTE
recommend
then,
both.
to answer that question, yes.
all right, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move to the full board for approval the criminal justice textbook for approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second on the CTE textbook adoption for criminal justice. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move to the full board for approval the pharmacy tech textbook for approval from the full board.
I have a motion and a second for the CTE textbook adoption of the pharmaceuticals Mosby textbook. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signifying by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move to the full board for approval the AP Environmental Science textbook for adoption.
Okay. We have a motion for recommendation to the full board for the AP Environmental Science textbook adoption. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, or any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Next up, we have,
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move to the full board for approval the Title I grant.
all right, we have a motion for recommendation for the Title I grant to be approved to the, or motion to be forwarded to the full board for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move to the full board for approval the Title II grant.
We have a recommendation to forward the Title II grant approval to the full board. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to forward the Title II grant to the full board for approval. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
We're on 3.
So, yes.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. You're doing good.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the full board the Title III grant.
All right, we have a recommendation to move the Title III grant for approval to the full board. We have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the full board for approval the Title IV grant.
We have a recommendation to move to the full board the Title IV grant. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second to forward the Title IV grant to the full board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Finally.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the full board approval of the approval of fees with the red lines in place as recommended.
We have a motion and we have a motion before us for approval of fees to be forwarded to the full board for approval with addition of the red lines. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Do we have any board member comments?
Madam Chair, if I may, I know this is your last meeting as the instruction chair, and I wanted to say thank you for the hard work that you've done over the past 2 years doing that. And, you've gotten a lot of stuff passed, and we've worked together really well. So thank you for your leadership on this committee, and I appreciate all that you've done for the students of Frederick County.
Thank you so much. I would also say I really appreciate your advocacy for our English language learners. They are a large part of our population here in Frederick County, and I think it's really important to make sure that we don't let them fall behind or leave them out. They're very valuable, and they add so much character to our county here. And I will be in that arena in about a month, so I'll have a whole new appreciation for that language learning. And it's been a pleasure to serve and see how much advancement Mr. Thompson has brought into the CTE department. I'm really proud of all the introductions of the criminal justice, the culinary arts program. Those are really, really important. And if you take a look at the approval of fees, I also share what Mr. Thompson said, that I wish we could just wipe away all these fees. There is a massive power in programs. When I was in high school, I was able to participate on the swimming team for 4 years because there were no fees. They paid for swimsuits and all the equipment, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had the school district not absorbed that for me. So I'm a really big believer, and I wish one day we can completely wipe away all of those fees for everybody, because again, just in the CTE, aspect, you see nurses aid, you see carpentry, you see computer science, you see so many skills that we are directly going to give back to our workforce and our community. That means more funds for us. And we have to have our constituency remember that it's important that we know about our local composite index. That is going to factor into the state funds that we receive, and they will get lower and lower because our county is getting richer and richer. And we really need to stay on top of that. We need to have parents and teachers and leaders advocate for full funding, because anywhere you go in the world, people look for good schools, and we need to provide the best just because children deserve it. Thank you so much. Any other comments? All right, I think we have a final motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.